1 second. And it looks like we are live.
Hello, everybody. I'm Geeta Nadkarni, the founder of Impact with Influence. And today I'm going to teach you how to say what you do in a way that makes your clients want to buy. And I know you're thinking, okay, messaging, this is all about attracting the right clients. And yes, I used to think so too back in the day. But my understanding of how this works has evolved. So today I'm going to teach you how to create your ideal clients with your messaging. Stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Now, you know the drill. If you're one of my regular watchers, you already know that. What's the question I'm going to ask you right now? First things first, if you're watching the replay, and I know many of you just can't make this time slot work live, bummer, because I love interacting with you. I love seeing your names in the chat. Hey, Nomita. Hey, Yasmin. I love seeing you here. I love working your topic into the actual content here. So if you're watching the replay, though, give me a big old hashtag replay so I can get to know you even if you can't be here live. And if you are here live, then you know what I'm going to ask you, right? Tell me where you're from and tell me what your coaching topic is. Again, this allows not just me to get to know you and work your topic into the examples that I give, but it also lets the community connect with each other. So we can become a referral source for each other. We can see how, we can go check each other out. We can learn from each other's messaging. I mean, that's my favorite part of building this community. So please tell me where you're from and what your topic of coaching expertise is. There's Mariella, yay! And Nicole, hello. All right. So today we're going to be talking about my favorite messaging magic, I guess is the best word to use it. Where I'm going to teach you how to evolve your thinking about how to say what you do. So, just to start off, tell me in the comments what's your biggest struggle with your messaging. So, that'll give me kind of a pulse for where you're at, what your specific issues are. This is also a really helpful tool for me to figure out, okay, what specific trainings can I develop for you moving forward? So, if I see a trend in your struggles, then I know that that's the next thing that I need to do a 30-minute training on. All right. So tell me what it is you most struggle with in your messaging, and I will tell you how to explain what you do to make your clients want to buy. All right. So Nicole says, I'm from Oklahoma. My coaching expertise is in the spiritual development realm. Awesome. Cool. Hello, Benji. And there's Teresa from Alberta. She coaches small businesses who do not have an HR in-house with gaining confidence and knowledge in HR. That's fantastic. All right. So the very first thing that I'm going to ask you, it's going to be a really, really weird question, okay? Bear with me. It's actually something that I've taken directly from our program, and it's a concept we talk about a lot because oftentimes when I see people who are stepping into the premium space for the first time, what I see people do is they expand their pricing and then they throw everything in the kitchen sink into their program. And you know what that does? It creates overwhelm. Not just for you, because obviously a gazillion things in a program is going to make that program really hard to build and deliver, but it also makes it really overwhelming for your clients, right? So nobody needs a million things to do. I mean, how many of your ideal clients have oodles of free time and just need more stuff to fill it with? Anyone? Yeah, me either, right? I know my clients definitely don't have oodles of free time. So my whole thing is premium equals distillation. So the very first question I'm going to get you to ask yourself is, are you stuffing your bra or your jockstrap or whatever undergarment you choose to visualize for this particular example? Are you doing that? In other words, are you cramming your program with stuff because you think your market wants it, where you're like, no. So, and I've seen so many coaches who come to us to create a premium program really, really struggle with this. They really, really don't know what to do about this because they have this deep subconscious wound. And I want you to ask yourself if you're one of them, where they've had authoritarian parents or authoritarian figures in their lives when they were children who basically gave them the message that you don't know what you want, you're wrong for wanting what you want, the world doesn't want what you most want to give it. Right? There's something fundamentally flawed with you, and whatever it is you want is not the right thing. Don't be greedy. Don't, who do you think you are? That sort of thing. Right? And so what I see happening is these folks have a really difficult time giving themselves permission to want what they want. And we have a whole practice that we teach in our program about this. But these folks have a really hard time allowing themselves to want what they want. And most people think that that means, oh, I'm not allowed to make X amount of money per month, or I'm not allowed to own a house on the beach, or I'm not allowed to drive XYZ brand of car. Yes, it can show up there. But where I also see it show up is where people are like, well, I can't just offer just trauma coaching. Like, that doesn't necessarily help people make money. So, I mean, no one's going to buy it. No one's going to invest at a premium. I can't just help people with fill in the blank with whatever it is you most want to help them with. Right. And so what people end up doing is they dilute their expertise by cramming in a whole bunch of other stuff that they're only so at. I'll give you a really good example of somebody that we worked with. And I don't know if she's watching right now. I didn't see her pop up yet, but she's in our program and she's become a partner with us. And she had so much struggle with this because she didn't give herself permission to give, like I recently, she didn't give herself permission to work with people just on the trauma piece. She was like, no, I have to help them build businesses. I have to help them do this other thing. And I have to help them do that and this and that and the other thing. And so she was really stuffing all of this stuff into her program. Here's what happens in a situation like that. You end up feeling like an imposter because for chunks of your program, you kind of are. It's not your zone of genius. It's not where you have a shit ton of lived experience. It's not where you really shine and have proven tools and expertise that you've honed over, multiple months or years or decades, where you're like solid in your coaching methodology. Does that make sense? So even though you've got the piece that is all those things, it's hidden with all these other pieces that isn't those things. And so you just end up feeling kind of wobbly. How many of you understand what I'm talking about and where this is resonating with you? Because I've seen a lot of people come to us where they're like, well, for the longest time, I have this program and it helps people overcome their childhood subconscious blocks, but then it's also about marketing and it's also about social media and it's also about blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, how the frick do you sell that? Like, how would you even know who the person is that wants that? How do you pick and these are the same people who struggle with niche. These are the same people who are like, well, I don't understand. Like, all my clients seem really, really different. I don't get it. Like, how does this all work together? So that can happen. Does that make sense? Tell me if this is resonating for you. All right, cool. So the question that I want you to ask yourself, and write this down, because I don't just want you to ask yourself it right now as you're watching this video. I want you to put it in your journal. And when you have some quiet time, I want you to give it a good 15 to 20 minutes of undisturbed quiet time. Have I given myself permission to offer the world what I most want to offer it? It's not a small question. It's not an obvious answer. And there might be a yes, and there might be some buts underneath. So you want to just sift through that, because it can be a really powerful exercise, because this is the exercise that allows you to give yourself permission to really go for the things that you absolutely excel at and allow yourself to drop some of the other things and reconcile that gap. Does that make sense? Take a moment to sit with this question and type out in the comments what's coming up with you. Hey, Sharianne, and hey, Shernay. So tell me, right? Does this make sense? I've seen so many clients like this. Now, we've worked with many clients who, again, what happens is, I have another great example with this whole idea of, have I given myself to offer the world what I most want to offer it? I have another good example. So we have a client in our program right now who works with legal nurses. And she helps them set up an LLC and helps them kind of figure out exactly how to run their businesses. She is an absolute ninja. She's done this for years. She's run very successful teams. She's turned around hospital departments that were failing and flailing and losing money to being wildly profitable and having happy staff. She knows how to do this, okay? Now, here's the thing. So she was tempted after a couple of conversations that she had with folks on discovery calls for her. She was like, well, I have my full 8-week program, but then what I could do is kind of break it down and only give people certain pieces of it because, somebody might already have set up their company or they might have done this or they might have done that. And then what ends up happening now is if you're not solid in your offering, is that you'll be tempted to piecemeal it, right? And you might get bought into the story of somebody who comes to you and says, for example, with this particular client, she helps you set up the LLC or she teaches you how to do it. And the person's like, well, but I already have an LLC. I don't need that part. We're cool. I don't need it, right? Think about it. And now she's just like, oh, maybe I should charge you less and only give you the other part of the program. That was the dilemma that she was in. So here's what I'm going to say if you're in that position is that the right buyer, your actual ideal client, is not going to want to piecemeal all of this stuff. I don't go into Lululemon that's selling me a top, like a top and a pair of pants and say, well, I really like the pants. I don't know if I'm going to wear that top as much. I just want the pants. But they're like, it's a set and I'm getting it at a really awesome price for the set. I'll be like, great, I'll just wear the pants a lot and I'll wear the top whenever the hell I feel like wearing the top. It's the same with a program, right? I know I've gone into programs where certain pieces of them, I already have that piece dialed in. Great, I'm going to take 100% of my energy and put it towards the pieces that I most need the help on. Your clients are the same. The clients with the right attitude, the ones that are going to succeed, are the ones that come to the journey and say, okay, great. Certain pieces, I don't have to put all my energy towards those pieces. I've got that dialed in, but I could use so much help around this other stuff. Would you be willing to work with me on that? And so that's how we helped her resolve it in her own mind. And because we helped her resolve it in her own mind, she didn't end up discounting and she ended up making full price sales on all her programs. Does that make sense? So this is a big piece of what you need to ask yourself that will help you not get so stuck with piecemealing your work. Because some of it is like, I'm not allowed to offer all of it. Some of it is, I'm not allowed to offer just this. And some of it is, well, what if somebody has some pieces of it? Then do I need to then break it up? So that's a really important piece as well. Now, the next question that I want to ask you is, ask yourself, have I lived the transformation? And this is a big question that, again, brings up a lot of stuff for people. So if anybody has some bubbling stuff happening with this question, don't worry, you are far from alone, friend. There is many pieces to the transformation. Because sometimes people look at the transformation, they're like, well, I've made some progress on these aspects and I made other progress on those aspects, but I'm not perfect. And there's this big gap that always bothers me. So have I actually lived the transformation? And if any of you are thinking that, I totally get you. I have so had this thought process myself. That is not the way to think about it. Like, there are different pieces to the transformation. There's the physical manifestation of the journey, right? It could be if you do weight loss, then it's the actual physical transformation. If you're in relationship coaching, then it is the way that the two, either it's the person finding love or it's the transformation of the actual relationship and conversations and how much time they spend fighting versus not, that sort of thing. If you're in a business development offer, then it's like how much money was made. That's the physical transformation. There's also the emotional transformation, right? How has this person evolved the way that they look at problems? How has this person evolved the stress level that goes with the problems? How has this person evolved their ability to receive and hold abundance? There's that. There's the thought process, right? How are people now problem solving in a completely different way? Are you able to give somebody tools? Are you able to give them processes? Are you able to give them an actual system to follow? And if that's the case, then they may not have had the full physical transformation by the time they're done your program, but they have all the tools in place that they can continue that journey for the rest of their lives and profit from it forever after. So that's another piece that you want to kind of take into consideration. And something that is also worth mentioning, and this came up on our group coaching call earlier today, is I remember pondering a lot. So I have deep thinking time in my I would say in my day, because it is literally daily, but I have longer chunks that I do not every single day, but at least 3 times a week. And I ponder some of the questions that I hear trouble our clients, right? Because in many ways, they're bringing them to me in order for me to help them resolve them. One of the questions that troubled me for the longest time, and I noticed also troubled our clients for the longest time, was, what is wrong with me that I want to teach the thing that I feel like I haven't completely mastered, like I haven't lived that full transformation yet. So, do I have the right to teach it? Is this appropriate for me to teach? Am I the right leader for this job? Because maybe I'm not as far along as I would like to be. So here's what I would say about this. What I have realized is that people who do coaching as a vocation, if you're in this community, that means you, right? If you're coaching where, yes, you want to make a handsome living doing it, but this isn't some like, I want to do an automated course and never talk to my clients kind of situation. This is not that passive income deal. You're really in it for the transformation because you're lit up and turned on by somebody else being lit up and turned on in the same way. Does that make sense? The reason that we're drawn to this work is because we're on a on a continuum. You knew there was a continuum coming, didn't you? Yes, we're on a continuum, and what happens is when we have lived a particular, we're always our own best client, or we should be, right? If you're not taking your own medicine and practicing what you preach, and you're not a walking billboard for your methodology, then that is where you should be putting your energy right now. That is the first place to put your energy. Now, because you have lived at least a part of the transformation that you aspire to then deepen, and it makes sense, you're probably not there yet on the horizon of absolute nirvana. You're every time you help somebody else have the same breakthrough, you're reliving that transformation, you're re-experiencing it. And as you know, when if you've ever read a book twice, the first time you read it, it blew your mind. The second time you read it, you're like, oh my God, I missed so much nuance the first time because these concepts were so new to me. I feel like coaching does that too, where you can see somebody break through, and it's like a fundamental breakthrough that you've lived years ago. And now you're like, oh my God, I get to re-experience it. I get to understand it better. I get to see the mechanics at work. I get to now hone and develop and strengthen the process that led this person to the breakthrough because I'm seeing it from this other angle. I've lived it myself, and now I'm seeing it in somebody else and potentially many somebody else's with all these different details mixed in. Like, this is so powerful, right? And so now what happens here is that you basically re-experience and re-feed your love of the process. You have gratitude for the challenges that brought you to this place. You have compassion for the person living through it again. All of this feeds your energy, which then gives you more energy and more drive to go work with your own coaches to have now further breakthroughs, more higher level, deeper breakthroughs, which you then funnel back to your ideal clients. And so you create this beautiful continuum where everything is aligned, where literally everything is the same thing. Your work is also your personal development. Your business becomes your spiritual practice. So please don't feel shame if you're not there yet. You're never going to be all the way there. And what you realize over time is the more you fall in love with the work, the more there will come to you. Does that make sense? Tell me if this landed for you. All right. So there we go. I'm going to get to questions after. So the next question that I have for you is, how have I lived the transformation? So the first question I asked you obviously was, have I lived the transformation? Now I'm going to ask you another nuance to that. How have I lived the transformation? Right? This is something that we did recently with our mastery students, and it was completely life-changing. People came in kind of feeling stressed out and, just like being like, oh my God, I'm behind. Like, I need to do this and I need to do that and I need to have this figured out and da da da. And they left after our 90-minute call, like completely rejuvenated. So I'm going to ask you, obviously, we did a full, actually it was a 2-hour session. We did a 2-hour session. I don't have the time in this context to give you the whole thing, but I'm going to ask you some of those key questions. So if you don't have your pencils out right away, now is a good time. Okay, Melissa's like, live late. I was just talking about you, friend. Okay, so in the last 20 years, in the last 2 decades, how much progress have I made around my topic? So, you talked about your coaching topic earlier. How much progress have you made around that subject in the last 2 decades? Now, for many of us, it's your purpose, right? How many of you feel like your coaching topic is your purpose? Same, right? So how much progress have you made? How much transformation have you lived? Now, you're not going to have all the answers right this second because, again, these are very deep questions. I find that the better quality the question, the more your reality shifts very in this quantum way. You can make minuscule progress with like a smaller, more tactical question, and you can make absolute leaps and bounds if you ask a much deeper question. So that's my intention here. So one sort of sub questions to that bigger question is, how have I lived the transformation, is how differently do you think compared to 20 years ago? How differently do you act compared to 20 years ago? And what processes have you developed? And these are all the questions that we help our clients flesh out that then help them really systematize and processize their genius in a way that creates massive transformation and in a way that they're able to articulate. Because most of us have not thought about these things. You want to know how to get somebody's attention in a way that makes them say, oh my God, this woman has the goods. I need to work with her, right? If you want somebody to look at your stuff and say that, it's not going to be with some fancy tagline. I know everybody out there in the messaging space is like, you need an I help statement. You need it to be like super brief. It can't be more than how many ever words it's supposed to be these days, 20 words, whatever it is, right? You need everything to be short because brevity is the soul of wit. I'm like, great, brevity is the soul of wit if you're writing poetry. But when it comes to coaching where you want to describe transformation, you can't just be brief and expect it to have the same oomph. For example, the story of Romeo and Juliet, if we say, oh, boy meets girl, their families were enemies, they both die. That's brief. It's pretty much the highlights of the story. Does it give you at all the essence of that story? No, right? Brief can be too brief. So it's not about a clever tagline. It's not about any of those things. It's really about your understanding and your having spent time pondering, how have I created the transformation that I've created and that I've lived? What are my processes? Like, how do I think and act differently? And when you tell those stories with those nuances, that's when you're doing the rule number one of great storytelling, which is show, don't tell. If I have to tell you that I'm good at it, I'm probably not very good at it. But if I can demonstrate that I'm good at it and that I've got the goods, I don't need to tell you anything. And I don't need to sell you anything because you're going to sell yourself. Does that make sense? So that's what we do. And that goes to, obviously, show, don't tell. You have it right up there on the screen. And like, guys, I'm a huge believer in congruence, right? So I have to be, in order for me to feel incongruence here, I have to be my own best client. I will tell you this: impact with influence, number one client right here. I practice everything we talk about. I beta test everything on myself, often for months and sometimes for years before I share it. We're constantly evolving, but everything we first try on ourselves. When something breaks, we're like, how would we fix it? And that's why it works so well, is that we've broken it, we fixed it, we've beta tested it in real life, we've done it on really horrible days, we've done it when we didn't feel like doing it. We have a way past all of the resistances. That's why it works. And we only keep the stuff that stands the test of all of that. So start mining your life for what has stood the test of time, stood the test of resistance, that you're able to do on bad days, that your clients want, that will actually work for your clients, right? That's kind of like the litmus test that I always use for what do we put into our programs? What processes do we pass on? Because I don't know about you, man, I ain't no Pinterest person with oodles of free time. I need strategies that work for people with messy, busy, overscheduled lives that don't want to work all the time, that want deep thinking time, that want downtime, that want family time. Does that make sense? So it's got to work for someone like me. Otherwise, it's out. So does that make sense? Mary Catherine says, the more we teach others, the more we teach ourselves. Yes, yes. Yes, and we allow ourselves to get deeper into ourselves and into our own transformation. I mean, preach it to the choir. And Mary Catherine is, of course, one of our clients. So yeah, John, I love that. It's not about being clever at all. It's about truth, vulnerability, and clarity. Yes. So you have to know, we've talked about, I have lots of different kinds of continuums. Have you noticed that? I'm evolving this whole continuum concept. So be your own best client, figure out where on the continuum your ideal client lives, because you have to figure out, are they in the place where they are ready to raise their hand and get help? And how will you know? Think about the times in your life where you had to get to a point where whatever factors were in play collided or colluded to make you raise your hand to say, I need help. I'm done with this. Something's got to change. And I'm willing to invest not just money, but time and energy in changing this. So think about those stories. Those are the stories that you're going to nuance and develop and articulate and tell, where other people are. It's, I just said this on our group coaching call. It's not about telling people what they want to hear. That's what people think good messaging is. And it's so not that. It's not about telling people what you think their truth is. It's not that either. It's about taking full ownership of your truth. And what that means is you share your truth not as a tool to convince somebody else, but you share your truth as a beacon for somebody else to say, oh my God, somebody actually gets me. Somebody actually, she's living my story, right? That's what you do. So you're not doing it to convince somebody. You're not doing it with this end point in mind. You're doing it because you're like, I'm coming home to my truth. And if you can actually do it from that place, that's when it starts to deeply resonate for your ideal clients. And they will find you. And what I love about this, doing it this way, is that, and this is why we do such deep mindset work with our clients first, because if you don't have internal permission, if it's not yet processed emotionally, if it's not yet safe to share these stories, you can't put them out there. You're doing the pseudo vulnerability stuff, right? Where you're like, oh my God, I'm so vulnerable. Let me tell you how vulnerable I am. And that's telling, not showing. And I've seen people do this, where they're putting themselves out there, but they're really filtering the truth. It's when you can genuinely be with yourself in all of the oogie glory of it and be at peace. And you're not doing it for a pity party. You're not doing it for the attention. You're really just doing it because you're like, I get it. I see it. I learned from it. And actually, it's so cool. It's so cool what happened. I'm so glad it happened in a way. Or maybe you're not completely grateful. Like, we've worked with clients who've had some really deep, horrible trauma. You don't have to be grateful for the trauma. I just want to be clear about that. This is not about that. But you're able to leave the past where it belongs. And you're able to say, that gave me this incredible resource. That gave me this incredible strength. And now I have the tools to empower myself first, and now somebody else. And when you come to your messaging from that place, what's going to end up happening is your free stuff, the stuff that you put out, stuff like this, is going to create your ideal clients, because you're no longer just about attracting them. You're about helping people move on the continuum from where they're really mired in their pain. You're going to ask them really good questions that's going to get their thinking going. So, though, what you're going to have is a bunch of people who are right there on that place on the continuum where they're like, I need to buy yesterday, and here's my credit card, and they're ready to buy. And your messaging is going to show them and not tell them that you're the perfect person for them. There's going to be a whole bunch of people a little bit further back from that point that need to be brought to that point. And what your free content is going to do is ask them such deep, interesting questions that they become ready to buy. And that's the true magic of the kind of messaging that we do. So if this is the kind of messaging that you want to learn and have developed, where you can get our help to develop this for you, then use the link on your screen, because I will tell you this, I can give you all of the tips here and show you how it works. And it's so hard, and if not impossible, to do this on your own. It's a little bit like being a really great heart surgeon, but when it's your own heart, you just can't operate, right? You just don't have you don't have the necessary perspective to be able to do a great job, to be able to do a truly nuanced job, because there's always emotional stuff in the way. And that's why this level of support becomes really, really powerful. I want to give you a concrete example of how we did this recently with a client. So we recently had a client, I have some notes here, who has these incredibly rich tools around managing energy and mindfulness and bringing things to the present. And what that does is it feeds entrepreneurs energy, so it drives their performance. But he was having trouble figuring out who was his ideal client and how is he going to talk to them? And he talked about how, so here's what he does. So I was like, what's the before and after of your client? So he was like, well, I work with a lot of people. They're really anxious. Sometimes they're depressed. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I asked him this. I was like, how are you your own ideal client? And he was kind of taken aback. And then he says, I was like, were you ever anxious? Were you ever depressed? And he's like, well, I wasn't anxious exactly. Like I was never depressed, like not like therapist level anxious, but what I would do is I would just go and do and do and do and do. And I was really driven and I would just overwork and I would hustle. Now, I don't know if you heard what I heard. Here's what I heard. If he had put himself out there talking about anxiety or depression, he'd have gotten a whole bunch of those people who actually need a therapist or may have been looking for a therapist, somebody to hold space for that anxiety or give them solutions for that level of anxiety. But he himself, the high performer, the kind of person he wanted to attract, never actually identified with that label. He never thought of himself as anxious. That was not, like, he didn't see himself that way. So what he'd identify as somebody who was like a recovering hustle porn addict, right? Somebody who's like, just, he had been driven by sheer adrenaline and then had hit a wall and was burning himself out and wanted a better way. And instead of having these relationships that he was kind of burning through and task lists and stuff, shiitake chips, man. I am addicted to these.
Whoa, those are so good.
Oh my God, they're so good.
They're so good.
Julie and David, you guys got me so addicted to these.
We should
But
get
now I have
them
like
as a
shiitake on my tonsils.
we should get them as a sponsor.
We should get them sponsored.
Yeah.
Head to Costco, people, before I buy them all. But as I was saying, actually, Pat will buy them all. Nah, I'm not even kidding. But I was going to say, this particular client did not identify as anxious. And so what he needed to be talking about and what he needs to talk about, and this is what we're helping him develop, is that addiction to workaholism, that addiction to hustle, and that the emptiness of that particular struggle. Because if he gets into the nuances and the articulation and the details of that, he's going to find his ideal client. They are anxious, and yes, their actions are driven by anxiety, but they don't identify that way. And they don't see themselves through that particular lens because anxiety means a particular thing and they don't identify with that. Does this make sense? Same data, completely different conclusion, different messaging. That's what we help our clients do. All right, let me see. Let me see about what questions we have. All right. Does anybody have a question? And I would love to hear, what is the thing that you heard from this live that you are now going to go out and implement? Like, what are you going to do? Because if you just sit there and be like, whoa, mind blown, that was amazing, but you never actually take a particular inspired action, this was a wasted half hour. And that would make me sad. So tell me, what is it, Leona? This landed for you. This is great. What specific change are you going to implement as a result of watching this live? Tell me in the comments, and I am going to come back and answer all of your questions in the comment section because I love spending this time with you. And I will see you all next Thursday. Bye.